So welcome to today's talk, Madhavi Kukreja. It's such an honor and a pleasure to have you. You really live and embody the change that we so often talk about at the Goa School. And so you're our perfect guest, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. Now I'm going to jump right into the questions because, you are the big change
Hello,
maker
and
who knows. A little bits about you will come out as we speak. So I'm not going to go into any sort of major introductions. So Madhvi, now, what would you define as change or this change that we're all after, social change, etc.? What would you say change is?
of course, change, uh, as defined by everyone, is lots of things. And I think I keep changing my definition of change also. Um, but I mean, like I used to say, when I worked in Chitrakoot, that the biggest change in 15 years was that bread came to Chitrakoot and that chips came into the market and one road was built.
Yeah.
So I mean, all that sort of change is of course around us and all over the place. But for me, I think it's definitely the change in your mindset, and it's also the change has to keep happening, and it's in the change in the way you live your life. And it's constantly change means constantly thinking about the way things are and how you're maneuvering them and how you're not only changing yourself but how much you can change people around you. Not in like uh, you know as far as only education or change them to make them like you, but to watch it all and to keep thinking, like it's a rotational wheel, and you change and then the next wheel changes and the next wheel changes, because they just touch each other for a while. What would it be like? What kind of vehicle would that be? But for me, that's what changes, because I'm not looking at larger revolutions, because I don't think in my life I've seen that, and now I've accepted that maybe that can't happen. Is
Oh,
that
no, but tell me about Chitrakoot first before we go there, because Chitrakoot has been, where you've been empowering Dalit women for many years. And tell us more about it. First of all, where is Chitrakoot?
Yeah, Chitrakoot and Banda, like the armpits of the world. Maybe not now. We have our first highway, but it's on the UP-MP border, very close to Allahabad, and it's part of Bundelkhand, which is a plateau, like a dry scrub-like area, which is very little change in even 30 years, and it's still very, very poor. And there's a lot of caste. It's feudal. It's I mean, even though the market is penetrated, there's a lot that hasn't changed there. So Bundelkhand is the way it is. I mean,
Yeah,
a lot of poverty, a lot
right.
of poverty, a lot of
Right.
violence.
A lot of violence as well. So
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is
And sometimes, like, still, I mean, no large scale migration or anything. So there's no, there's not that feeling of change like I've seen in many other rural villages around urban areas that, you feel get very influenced.
Yeah,
It's just a bit like a time bomb.
a bit like a time bomb. Gosh, that's a quotable. So to go back to what you were saying earlier, these are, you're saying the market has arrived. So, you can get Coca-Cola or whatever it is. And you know how it is that when I come back to
Vishal Mega Mart.
Vishal Mega Mart. So when
Yeah,
I come back,
malls.
for example, to Lucknow over time, I mean, the big differences I see, for instance, is that, even if if there's a guy who's riding a rickshaw or if he's on a scooter, etc., his clothes are now washed. He obviously has the leisure time and he can afford it, and there's water. So you can see that there are small changes like that, and in terms of the progress that people make. But I'm assuming that there are also good changes, but there are also changes that are perhaps not so good. I mean, sort of good development and not so good development. Is this something that you think about as well when you
No,
think
no,
about?
no, of course. I mean, terrible. I mean, I do feel that the way feudalism has completely converted to a market economy. So, and this whole, for example, I mean, if you look my pet topic of shadi and the way the market economy plays on shadi, I mean, really, it's as if keeps big business alive. And the whole thing of, so people don't change as far as um, you know they spend differently, and it seems that the poor are still the poorest. So I mean, I'm just saying that the fact that people spend so much on weddings crazily,
Yeah.
while I mean they would go into deep debt and nothing else will change, um, is something that weddings maybe look the same now across Chitrakoot and Lucknow and maybe Delhi even, in a way. The same fountains going up, the same standing, and I mean the same drones photographing everything. The exact same lehengas with the exact same embroidery has reached every corner, and still in Chitrakoot, you'll have thalis of money being the tilak. And amongst all, but even the Dalits, so the really poor, will also like kill themselves for that two-wheeler now. Um, but so I think I think of it a lot as so much of this, and then yet the poverty is still there, the violence is still there, and in many ways life is the same.
Yeah.
And it's in very few cases, and I mean I think it's also when you look at even people who are working for change, like people working in NGOs and all, and how much are they able to change, who I think have a big role to play, but how much are they able to change their homes? um if you start measuring like that all across, I mean, it's or people who are working outside or people who've got government jobs, and what does it come back and make them change as far as caste? Marriage is so entrenched, intercaste marriage is unknown. Yeah, there are more romances on the mobile, but yet, things don't change. So change is the change that we don't want to think about happens really fast, and the other change seems to happen really slowly. So, so I
Well,
think it's
okay, so let's just talk about Chitrakoot for a second. What made you start working there, and what changes are you most proud of that you managed to do there after all these years?
yeah. I mean, I reached there really randomly, and it was just like a big city girl wanting some experience of a village and wanting to be in a rural area. So I mean I think and then realizing that how slow change is. So 14 years there seems like nothing. I mean, our organization Vanangana that I founded there has been working for 30 years.
Wow.
um, but so change this kind of change that I'm talking about is really really slow, even with you know like now everybody's in primary school, and everybody's maybe even up to class 8, not only because of our work but because of what the government has done with RT. But the quality of education or the perspective of what they do with that class 5 education or class 8 is still, I mean, there's so little, illiterate
But
people
you
do know.
will, right, but you will have interacted with them for now almost a generation, right? I mean, in 30 years,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you
yeah, yeah. I mean, I
so
think the
what do you
kind of,
think about all
yeah, I think mobility is increased tremendously. I think women don't, a lot of women, not all women, don't take the kind of women we've been able to touch, which is still a really small amount if you take the whole lot, have not been, do not take a certain kind of violence in their lives. I think the group of women that I've worked with and have changed things in their own lives, at least as far as what they want, like the leadership there now, as being able to live as single women, as to being able to have love and romance, as to be able to um, keep working there. I think that's something I'm most proud of.
I would,
But
yeah,
I
because
think that,
these are women
it
who are facing gender and caste-based violence on a daily basis, right? And this is how you
yeah,
found them. So that's
yeah.
fantastic. Because they have greater mobility. You said that earlier, and now to have love and romance.
So but it's who all are you able to reach out to, and how many? So if you in a village, I mean, not to be depressing, but if you're in a village, reach out to 10 women or 15 women. Or I mean, of course, the fact that at least 300 women contact you in a year, and it that stays constant. um but I mean, I think that till marriage is sort of the center of everything. The
Yeah.
cycle of violence, I don't know about it. I mean, I don't know whether to feel pleased about the women who have and who have managed to get out, and who have like put a stop to it in their lives. Or is it that a lot of women choose, knowing that they should be out of it, to stay in it also?
That's
And
also the
I
nature of patriarchy.
because I think in the West, it's the cycle of violence is also huge with development. I mean, in the most developed countries in the world, you look in America, you look at with so much information and access. When do women make that change?
Yeah, no, but that's
Um,
also the nature of patriarchy, isn't it? With women come up against it and against gender-based violence, so they actually have to face more violence until they can break out of it. So there's, it becomes a very personal choice at the end. But
yeah,
tell
and
me,
also, I mean, I feel that um, well, I don't know. It's like I go back and forth, because if you are against, I mean, you're pleased about mobility, you're pleased about women access from 4% literacy to whatever 45%. You have women, uh, adult women changing. You have little things like Khabar Lahariya, for example, or Vanangana. Khabar Lahariya is a digital news magazine that has got now 1 million views, and they're journalists from that area, and they're giving news in a different perspective to so many people, to actually men and women, on all kinds of things, whether it's development, violence, culture, everything. And they're Dalit, they're probably the only Dalit and Muslim rural women journalists. Same, the Vanangana team, the way they work on violence and the way they support women right to the end, right through the journey. Uh, I think it's the group that reaches out to the largest number of women on violence across UP. I can say that confidently. So all that makes me is really exciting that it can keep happening. It has an outreach. But I think the sea of needs is so huge that then you suddenly come up a case which is as brutal and as awful as it was 30 years ago. So that's not going to change. It's just that more women have access to it.
that's true.
That's all.
How do you, and this can be, I mean, so it's uplifting and also devastating at the same time. So, and then you have to play this role of a change maker where sort of it's almost like, what can you do to prepare for it? I mean, and did you receive a special education? Was there something in your childhood that made you see that this is absolutely the thing you want? I mean, what keeps you going? Because at the end of the day, this is all so, um, it's heart
Yeah,
wrenching. After 30 years, I mean, as you're saying, you have to reconcile to a few things versus carry on with a few things. So, yeah, I've asked you like 20 questions in one. So,
yeah, no. I mean, I coming from a fairly privileged background, and access to school, and convent educated, and Calcutta and everything. I think um um there was something in me, and I think there's a question that you made me think about: is that is it inborn, or is it something influences you around? And I think it's probably both. That you, I mean, I had the I I noticed what was in a city like Calcutta, which is right there. And I mean, so did Mother Teresa notice it. And so did a lot of other people to work there. And just I mean, the disparity that's there so intensely. And then it's just you that it, it's strange to say that it gives me I, I like doing it. I didn't want to say that it gives me a kick. I was going to say that. But it's something that I like doing. And it's not only because maybe I like observing change and the journey of change and people's lives and how they can then be enabled to do that. And I think you do need a little chubby to do that. So I think in Calcutta, I mean, Calcutta as a city just gave me a lot, and just my opportunities in school and then I took them. It's like I used to go teaching some kids after school. I mean, we used to do it in school. And then before I know it, I'd made friends and I've been in friends with them right up to now. That family that I looked after and I went to looked after means I taught them and I was supposed to. And then I just like kept in touch with them and I've watched their journey. I mean, 10 of them used to stay in a room 8 by 8. And that was one of my first experiences. One of my first experiences was the 84 riots also, and being in Delhi at that point, and then along with many others being part of this Nagrik Ekta Manch. I was a student and all civil society came together. And I mean, seeing what happened with the Sikh riots and pulling people out from, from burning houses around, because I was there at that point. But I think that, so some of this really kind of influenced me in deep ways to want to work in that field broadly. But otherwise, I think I really enjoy what I do. And that's why I do it. And I just reached Chitrakoot just because I wanted field experience. And then, like I said before, I knew it would take a long time. And that's how I did it. Have I answered all the questions?
Yeah. And I have a further question, of course, which is that, when you're taking on the powers that be, or when you're angry about what you see and you want to channel that and you want to do something with it. And, a lot of it could be that, you do dharnas and you have picket fences and you shout and you attack and you're confrontational in your attitude. And I just wanted to know, how far does that work? I mean, does one have to temper yourself? Does it change over time? I mean, you've been at it for 30 years. Is there some part that you almost never compromise on? So, because it's obviously a scale, right? So could you give us some stories about how, you might have been really out there and quite pushy versus how you might have changed over time? And
I think I really, even then I realized, but I think I was probably much more aggressive and pushy before and impatient even with the people who were change makers like me to be further change makers. Like I think I've shared up this irritation with Sindhur, and then, I would not want anyone to wear Sindhur and was willing to do anything to make their decisions not to wear sindoor, right? Which is to wash the sindoor off for them. I think I'm a little more patient as far as all that goes, and say that okay, everyone has to make their own decisions and choices from what do they want to change, and who am I to decide what somebody else wants to change. I just have to put it out to them what I think that what should be changed. Like what is my understanding of patriarchy is that marriage is the biggest problem, and that this and marriage and that everything that goes with it, which is inheritance, which is a name, and the fact that a woman can't be a single mother and all these things. I think that's the crux of the problem. But that would be something that struck me. It may not strike you, it may not, strike other people. So I think I've always had so besides, I mean, understanding that I can just say what I understand and share that, but everybody may not accept that. But I think surviving in a place like Chitrakoot, we had to have a balance, otherwise we'd be thrown out. So you had to do the dharnas and all, because you had to reach out to many more people through that, and you had to say this is not acceptable. But you also had to have the good hat, and you had to go for those shadis that you didn't like to go to, or you had to have conversations with people in administration, with the same men in the community that you were really like irritated with, who'd beaten the woman the day before, but you had to talk to them gently, hoping for change, knowing that it won't. But you had to have the good hat and the bad hat all the time. You had to work on good, you had to be the person who could find access for everyone for education. You had to, but there were certain things that, of course, were non-negotiable. For example, violence was not something we would accept. We would not openly jump into intercaste and inter-religion marriages, or love affairs, but we would definitely support them quietly. So, you have to decide the time of how you can intervene and with what you can intervene. But I think coming to Lucknow has been interesting also, because there I had the official tag of a change maker. So I was there. We had an organization. We'd made it for change, for empowerment, for accessing rights. So we had huge dharnas. We had huge demonstrations. We thought of that for ourselves, for our own community of women, collective, to feel the strength, and also to spread the word around as much as you can. But in Lucknow now, seeing a lot of people who are not so based in community, and I feel that the dharnas that we do often, which are tokenism, like 20 people gather under the Gandhi statue, or 50 people with little, placards and slogans, and we're making a point just for ourselves, and maybe it'll be in the media. So for me, unless it's a huge dharna with huge numbers now, and in Chitrakoot it made sense, because 1,000 people there, 1,500 people there was, really made news. But here, if it's not 5,000, it's not going to make news, unless it's something like, of course, I think the one community here that seems to have done it is the LGBTQ community, with their pride parade and everything. Because it's small, but it's really colorful. So I think it challenges a lot of other decorative kind of ideas. But I think in Lucknow, I've like, just through the festival and putting the perspective out in a very different way. Not on the face of it being a change maker, on the face of it, sort of being a cultural god, Zarina, I've been called to. Don't feel like one. But, through that, how gently you put the point across. Like, our team was a lot of women, there were different looking women. The topics we take up, how we deal with our themes, our perspective somehow comes out. Many people think our festival is the first festival where they notice that, say, all communities are there. So saying things in a very different way. So there have been two very different ways of working. In Chitrakoot, where you're all out and it's always strategizing, and here where you're doing something else, but your perspective is there underlying. And I think people notice. They notice. I don't know how much they change, though.
That's very cool. And I suppose these dharnas and all have the added advantage of helping younger generations of people to learn what the fight is about, right? Because it's, there's a certain atmosphere, there's a collection of people, this, that, and the other. So it's hopefully more than just tokenism. I mean, I know that.
Yeah. But I think dharnas also but dharnas, like, say, when people came out for certain cases of sexual assault, it's not that cases of sexual assault don't come, 2014 and Nirbhaya or whatever, and things like that.
Those were huge.
Or even the support that Bilkis just got, after the release of those people. So some things like this touch the chord, but even to reach that, you have to strategize a lot.
You do. So, but back to the theme of being a change maker now, because this is well, the Goa school inducts people who have the potential to be change makers, and so we're really getting into the life and times of Madhavi as a zesty change maker. The question I want to ask you is: are you also necessarily a political person? Can you elaborate that on that a little bit? Because I'm sure you are. I mean, it has to be. You have to have a stand on something, right?
Yeah. Even though I stay very far from political parties, and I feel that political parties do not, but I'm very political. I'm definitely very political. And I think everything is political. I think everything you do is political.
Correct.
And many people might disagree with this kind of mirror or kind of lens at looking at things, because it's all being political means, oh, we're not political, we're not part of party politics.
Yeah,
But even in it, there were times in Chitrakoot when we had a particular party supporting us, but we said you can't support us with your flag, but you can be there. There was a death of a Dalit party worker who used to be very supportive of the collective also, and we took up this cause, and so the at that point the BSP stood by us because it was a party worker of theirs, and they walked with us. But of course, ironically, the BSP then made government 2 months later with the BJP, and it was the fight was between the two at the village level. So I'm very wary of party politics, and I don't think one should be identified with any political party. It's been a kind of hidden dream for me to stand for elections and be part of party politics, but I haven't figured it out, and I'm already 60.
maybe
8 months before 60. 8 months before 60.
Yeah. Can you imagine having an all women's party or a all India women's party? That would be fantastic. That's half of India. We hold
I
up.
know. Yeah, good idea. I think Madhuri, you'll be the secretary. But it would be wonderful. And I think if you can work it out, say, I guess AAP's not so long. Is the youngest party around. And you can do it.
No, but
You know.
can't you? Because then everyone, whichever side they were on, I mean, they would join because they're women. I mean, isn't that the whole point? So,
Women
yeah.
and I guess an LGBTQ RST also.
Yeah, all
But
of that.
anybody who identifies themselves
I think
as
it's the Congress who did come up with
marginalized.
a
Huh?
manifesto. The Congress had come up with a women's manifesto, right? Some time ago. I wonder what happened to that.
Yeah. They all often do. They all have one. They all
Hmm.
give what they're going to do, and many women's groups ask them for that.
Yeah.
I think there's a huge this thing on the national movement of women, which I feel has played a huge role in passing many laws and demonstrating and keeping the feminist women alive. But it's not the only thing is, much as I feel completely part of this Mahila Andolan, but it's not big enough. And whether we can manage the way party politics happen. So I think it's going to be a dream that's not going to be ever,
Probably not. All
yeah.
right. So, okay. So this brings us to this other question, which is that, okay, what do you do when you're sort of in the doldrums? You've tried a lot, you've got a little bit of burnout or sort of emotional fatigue, etc. Because I'm sure that comes up, especially when horrible things happen. I mean, I know that I've been in development for about 25 years, and sometimes I go back to villages in UP and I think, oh my God, nothing has changed. It's like going back 200 years. I mean, people's lives haven't changed and development hasn't touched them. And so you wonder what you did with your whole life and you think, well, where's all this effort going? So when you when you get to this point saying that, hey, it's going to be a dream that'll never happen, or, of saying, I've come to accept how things are a little bit, what do you do to pull yourself out of that? Because, I mean, one has to keep the spark alive somehow, right?
Yeah, I think what got me down the most is when the context, when everything seems so polarized around me and
Right.
communal, and I think that has been, and knowing that maybe it's not going to change because that change in people's mindset um, takes years to change once it sets in.
Yeah, so it's a really, really big fight. And then you ever come across that idea that how will I ever, even with my hundreds of women, it's too much to come up against. Did you ever feel like that? And then what do you do to
Yeah,
just.
yeah, and I think that even people around you get so influenced, even with your, the hundreds and thousands of women might come together on violence against women, but on these larger issues of how people suddenly start believing something else or actually become communal, or they they kind of forget, they get so influenced by what the general jargon is around, that has been the most difficult to accept and the most depressing. You know, mm, I mean, the Wilkie's fight being an example, it's just like something people know about it, the Gujarat fight and something like that, and winning and then losing again, and also how many people look at it as
Yeah, you're not being able to sustain that change because it's almost like the environment around
yeah.
isn't
Yeah,
able
so
to.
I think that has been hugely depressing. So I mean, sometimes like uh, is being casteist and communal also. Um, I mean, something to accept is if you're believing in inequality for women, but you're casteist and communal. So I mean, I
Yeah.
think that all those things go together, and
Mm,
it was easier like to work in a box of just women's empowerment at one point. But
right.
now, when you try and challenge everything together, and it's not that the
But you
people in the caste boxes are not, patriarchal, and so when you try and really, really change all that together,
but it
it
is
and it,
those wheels you were talking about earlier, right? So you start off one little wheel and one thought process, and that
yeah,
necessarily impacts another one, and and then suddenly, once you've been through that process, it just percolates into all parts of your life, and you can't really stand up and say, this is what I believe in, if you don't actually change all of that. And life is
yeah,
so complex. I was just saying that in one of my articles today, that it's so complex that all of us are really part of a system where we cannot really be blameless for much of the oppression in society. I mean, we may be all clear on the one side, but we might still be consuming things out of Amazon, or whatever else
yeah.
it is. We're not completely through and through doodh ka dhula, as they say over here, or I don't know the gender, but never mind. So anyway, so let's come back to something exciting, which is that, in your case, you are absolutely a person who lives the change, right? And your personal life is something which can be held up as something that's really exemplary and to sort of aspire after. So tell us about how you've been breaking the shackles of patriarchy and how you.
I, yeah, and I mean, I think that somehow now that I look at it, now that I reach 60, I think that was probably, at least it's easier. You know about the next mountain to climb rather than this huge context that you have to take care of. And so I think that in a way, I think micro changes in my own life and then other people's life have been the most exciting. And so I think I tried to focus on that. Initially, it was because I wanted to be the person I claim to be.
Right.
And so being a single mother without a biological father to the name, to fostering many children, to um, adopting a child, to, loving and living out of out of age and out of religion. I think I kind of have it sounds like I've done it all, but it's also because I've I know that how challenging each one of those are at the micro level, and I did it because I believed in it, and so I wanted to go on that journey. It's not that I searched for someone to love who was from another community, or that I mean, I had a baby because I wanted to have a baby, um, and didn't speak about it for years actually in the beginning because it was difficult to get acceptance. But I think that if you do live like that, I mean, I think one of the things that I've not been able to beat is class, and that's something I still really debate about and think about. I think I have a more equal home than maybe many homes in this country. I mean, with
Like it's
but
also that. And I think how you open up your home as a center of learning, and there's people from all backgrounds. It's really fantastic. I mean,
but
this
you
is
know how it is true, but how much you're right, but still the privilege of class is something that you wear it, and it's difficult to leave it because it's something that much as you say, I mean, my home is open, it is as equal as they go, and anybody's welcome to come and stay and do one of my whether it's my own home, or I do dream of starting a space which is a home with a view, which would be for all women across the board also. Many children, I mean, which would be a more larger space than my own home, which has kind of brought up about 20 kids over the years.
the other way of doing it would be I'm just elaborating only for change makers who might think about what paths they want to go on themselves. But the other way of doing it would be like someone like Medha Patkar, for example, who would leave everything and go and actually live in the village that she's
Yeah.
I had the good fortune of meeting her once, and uh, she said, Madhuri, I come from the same kind of background as you, but look at me today. I wear the saris that the women in the village give me, and that's all I own. And I was thinking, fantastic. So you really have to think about, you may
Yeah.
aspire to all the political and the personal is the political and live your life, etc., but there are very few people who can actually trot the Medha path or the Gandhi ji path, where you literally
Yeah,
take
absolutely.
decision.
Absolutely. But I guess it's, I mean, you could question, and absolutely both are role models in my life, but, and that's something I haven't been able to do. But I think that one, with them, on the other hand, you could question their patriarchal mindsets, or, how open they are to. So, I mean, I think everybody also does crack it at one point and doesn't crack it the other. But I think one has to be conscious of that at least, and know that you're not like you've not reached just the pinnacle of success because you managed everything, and you can't, and you're constantly, something will come up constantly that you've not thought about. Something will come up that
And
you're not comfortable with.
there'll be criticism. I mean, you spoke about Mother Teresa. There's untold criticism about her. There's criticism about Gandhi ji, about Medha, poor thing. So, I mean,
Yeah.
like, you have to also battle with that and decide for yourself, I guess, what it
Yeah.
is, what it is that you are willing to put out and give of
Yeah.
yourself. You can't give away your whole self, because I mean, how do you have to have some sense of sanity, some sense of joy, some sense of achievement, fulfillment. Also, I mean, you're also human, right? So, I'm assuming you were going to say.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that, and also that the fact that you have to keep it can't stop. There's no plateau. There's no like, okay, I've reached the top of the mountain. I think that's also something that you really realize, and maybe that does exhaust you also, because you're always challenged. You're
Yeah.
always challenged with something you've done. I mean, all like they say, all kids challenge their parents and everything. But even when you have that equal relationship with your kids and they're not challenging you that much, they're kind of saying, stop challenging everything. That's what they're telling you. But I think there are a lot of things which you might feel comfortable or not so comfortable about. Sexuality is something that can be explored and I mean, not as say, the various types of sexuality, the various. I think I'm not as cool about it, or maybe I don't understand it completely. Um, Polygamy, many things that now are thought about and talked about, and with asexual, pansexual. I think I try and understand them completely. But I think that again, it depends on. But in my core, I think that's a journey that I have to follow and understand.
So would you say that the key is to always have an open mind? Because there will be things that we don't know, right? We can't possibly learn everything about the world or all its problems or all its solutions. So in that journey, I mean,
Yeah, I think, and to keep questioning yourself all the time, to keep questioning yourself and understanding that where have you reached, and to keep questioning your own relationships, and to keep seeing how equal they are, and how and what new challenge can you take? I mean, constantly. And I think because I have so many kids in my life, that maybe that gives me that chance to automatically do that. But I think to constantly think about that, I mean, to me, that makes it more exciting also. And I often find that people, by the time they reach 60, for sure, they kind of at a plateau and we've done it now. Let us be. But I mean, let us just be the way we are. And probably one is rigid. But I think you have to keep thinking, keep challenging yourself.
particularly because our country has almost gone back a few years, right? I mean, you would think that
Few
there are some
decades, 100 years.
we've done fairly well, something with which, the old order is completely gone. And not that that's in itself a bad thing, but then there's institutions that are crumbling, there's certain ways of doing things that are, things, I mean, things like this whole communal disharmony, stuff that we wouldn't dream about as children has suddenly come up into the fore. Just one example. So let's just zoom out a little bit now and think of where our country is.
I think one thing I just want to come in is that's why one is trying to take up and work on different, even if one can't change the macro, but to always keep working at the micro level on all these issues.
That's actually a
So
really good.
yeah, and I
Otherwise,
think that's how, I mean, the fact that even like when you go into a riot situation, we went into Gujarat, Muzaffarnagar. I don't think we could reach out to the many lakhs that needed reaching out to, but at least by reaching out to so many, that you, as much as you could do with your sort of two hands and with your teams, you could do for to be part of that journey with people. And I think that's very important for me.
yeah, I think that's a really good message to pick, size down, figure out what it is that you want to work on, and keep going with that one. So, tell me something. What are the big problems you think that you face right now? The reason I ask is because, um, I mean, a lot of the problems that you've been working on, whether it's through, it's women, it's caste, it's patriarchy, I mean, they're all interlaced problems, are they not? So, so what would you say are like the 3 or 4 big ones that if we can tackle, or that if all of us can tackle in our own ways, that then it will be a large step forward? Because I almost think that
In
I
India
almost think
today,
in India today, yeah. I mean, given the discourse, without making, I mean, and the Goa School is not a political organization, but obviously everyone has, their own politics, and there's, I mean, that's fine. You can express them as long as you're personal and we're not proselytizing in any direction. So, but please do tell us, I mean, what would the 3 or 4 problems be, in your opinion, that you feel youngsters should really put their mind to? Because some of our fellows will be looking for direction.
I really still feel that they should, that everyone should work on their personal journeys, and to make sure that you really to keep asking yourself that question is if you're living the life that you really believe in, and that personal is political. I mean, that was important to me 40 years ago, and I think it's still important, as important to me today. Um, mm, I, I do feel that communalism is one of the biggest challenges that we have today, and that is something that we all have to work on, and I think we also choose to ignore it completely now, because you say because it's so all enveloping all around you, that you say that, I mean, it's so frightening to work on it, and it's so difficult to work on it, means to even have a conversation with the next person, that we've stopped doing that. And that, to me, there are no larger strategies and there are no larger movements around that anymore. And that, to me, is really, really it's really, really important even today. And I think that even, I mean, coming to that, what's our own perception of the way minorities live? We can't, I mean, who are minorities, or who are Muslims, who are Christians, who are whatever? We've got to, I mean, we can't take it for granted anymore.
No.
The way, like you said, maybe 50 years ago, everybody, our parents' generation or something had something which was more livable with. They had a definition of different communities, identities. So I think this really is something that we really have to talk about in all. And I think that with this world becoming so much more, I mean, I'm using the word corporate or all the same, with everyone's this thing. I think even something like caste is completely ignored for me. So I think I mean, whether it's caste, whether it's sexual identities, there have been certain movements ahead in with 377, for example, being taken off. Caste has had huge, I mean, all the laws are in place. Women's empowerment has all the laws in place. But are people still personally in the small spaces? The questions are the same. I mean, there are more systems in place, sorry, just a minute. There's some, sorry, there's some systems in place in which people can kind of, sexual harassment committees are in place.
Right.
And 377 means it's legal to be gay and or lesbian. But that's just one step. Again, in caste, you're not supposedly, you can't discriminate against someone. But, you take it for granted after the laws are in place. So what are the next steps? And we have to constantly work on those next steps.
Yeah.
I mean, were the times worse before or other times better now? I think is irrelevant. They're all different times. And I think that we have to keep these basic things, the basic elements of our constitution are not in place in most spaces. So I think that we really have to work on them. I mean, poverty, yes, but I think we need bigger powers to work on that. I'm completely unsure as to how, even when you do big livelihood projects, whether you can. And I'm not saying that getting people out of poverty is not the most important thing. But I think that these things are more doable for all of us as individuals, for members of the Goa school. And I think that you have to, and it's not one of them. So it's not like I'm telling you to do a lot or that I'm saying we should all do a lot. Oh my God, she's talking about everything that's there. But I think it comes all together in a pack. I mean, it just all has to be.
Yeah, and in a sense, I mean, if you certainly are one person, has several interests, right? And you try and bring it all together, in a way that then adds up to a certain type of society. So tell us a little bit now about your other project. What is
And you being
Sanatkada?
a type of
What do you do to
person
build up
also.
your bioscope? Sorry?
I said, and you being a type of person, a type of society, and you being a type of person
Yes, you reflect
who gives
back. Yeah,
space
exactly.
for to
Yeah,
to people who also are fighting these in their own lives.
right. Yeah, yeah. So tell us
Not
more
enough.
about what you do through Sanatkada. I found the most interesting thing there was that you could buy clothes that would be suitable for any gender. I was like, oh, that's
Uh,
pretty cool. And
uh.
so tell us what Sanatkada is. Tell us what the shop does, where the crafts, and also what this Lucknow Bioscope project is. Because really, that's the other thing that, once you start off on this journey of change, is that actually you can diversify and do several things at once. So please, and also do talk about, making money out of it. How a social impact enterprise can actually make money. So, social change isn't all about social work and getting funding and trying to push out other people's funds, but also to create self-sustaining organizations. So
Yeah, so
that's
I
again
think,
another.
I mean, that after getting very tired of trying to do what you just said, I started this business model of Sanatkada as a craft shop. It's a marketing unit for different 110 groups across the country.
Yeah.
And we also have Nirmad Khana as a restaurant that gives which is food from Lucknow homes. So it also gives business and food to to a group of women who've not come out of their homes ever. Um, and their bawarchi, I mean, them as bawarchis and their bawarchis in their homes. And we have a festival, which again, I think generates a lot of business because it has a huge crafts bazaar, it has performances, it has, literary events, it has many things. Definitely, all of this should be sustaining, and we've tried to do that over the last 10, 12 years. I'm not going to say that I'm very good at it. I think that's the perfect way to do it in today's world, really, that you can generate income. And if you're not wanting to be like really rich, you can generate a certain kind of income enough for yourself and have a perspective to your business and do things with certain values in place. And I think you reach out to a lot more people. Um, I think the festival reaches out to a lot more people in that way with the perspective, and people notice, eventually they notice, whether they notice about the way culture should be explored in the city, whether they notice through our theme, feminists of Lucknow ko salam, and they look at that, whether they look at the Husne Karigari and look at the lives of the craftspersons who they'd never thought about before. 35 crafts in Lucknow and all the craftspersons behind them. Um, I mean, I do understand that when it's as in a form of a business and the festival, it's not so deep as the other work I was doing.
Right.
In the sense, the depth of the work with a fewer number of people. But I think you reach out, and I think culture is really powerful. And probably in today's scenario, culture is one of the most powerful ways. If people want to come into this space where, especially against today's scenario, where communities hardly ever meet, class hardly ever meets equally on equal platforms. I think the festival, the traditional mela that it is, exactly does that. So I don't know. I mean, we managed to sustain ourselves. We've just managed to keep with. I have to like give a secret that support from friends and family. Um, but still, at least it can sustain itself, and it does give market to a lot of people, like the craftsperson who cannot afford to even today have his shop in different cities and is not. So I think it has a critical space in this market economy also in what we're doing, and the fact that we can survive and small is beautiful.
Yeah.
I think I believed in small as a role model and example from the work I did before and even now. Because I feel
Yeah.
the larger you go, it just all peters out. And you
Yeah.
can't keep the perspective
Yeah.
and your values and you can't put it across. Because if
No.
you're too widespread, because then you're more, then it's a game of scale. So to me, once even Fab India, who I look at as a role model, went to 150 stores. They also had to like get buying agents into place and other middlemen back again. So I think small is beautiful. And I think small can be, I mean, there are a lack of people who come into our festival. That's big enough for me. I don't want to go further than that.
Yeah,
But
the 100,000.
I enjoy dreaming about being. I'm not a very good businesswoman, if you ask my team. But anyway, at least it's good because you're thinking about where the money comes from, and
No,
you're.
absolutely.
Mm.
Oh, thank you, Madhavi. We've really covered a lot of ground, and this is a lot of food for thought for everyone at the Goa school. As you know, we're recording this, and the recording will be available for people to watch over time. I'm going to open it up to questions for anyone who's online now. I've got one already, but I don't know who's asked it. Uh, um, Let me just read it out anyway. It's on the chat. It says, "What are some of the hardest things you have come across while being a change maker?" And we prefer people to just come on and ask the question live. So uh, maybe I don't know who
What
asked.
what are some of the hardest things that you've come across?
Yeah. Okay. What are
Yeah.
yeah
Well,
while being
this whole thing of we can't take the challenge of our own family. That's the hardest thing I've come across. Is that how people, because their family is their biggest support structure, and they can't think of another home and another way of making a family in whatever they're doing. I find that, and I find it so simple that you can make another family. I think if you give in that way, you're going to get back in that way, and you have this relationship of making this large family. I mean, Madhuri was talking about my home, but I mean, today I have in my life. I mean, not because in my life more than my relatives, who I love and they love me. I think, but it's they're not the. I mean, uh, in my day-to-day life, 365 days of the year, I have another family which is of all class, all religions, all castes. So when everyone else tells me, but then how, but what will you do? How can you challenge your own family? And this is the question I hear every time. Community and family. क्या जवाब देंगे? कैसे करेंगे? हम अकेले कैसे करेंगे? Then I feel
yeah
that you're not willing to give. And I feel so sad that that's a question I've heard for the last 30 years or 40 years. What would I do without my? If you gave to that new family you can make, I always feel as much as you give to your own family, it would be all. I mean, so I find that a very tough question. How do I break the family? How do I break the institution of marriage? How do I break people's support idea of what their support system should be? I mean, what do I? How not? How do I break? But how do I explain what can be or what as a role model? So I don't know that biggest challenge.
yeah. So people are willing to
People are
change.
not really willing to do personal is political. They're willing to go out and change the world, but very little change in their own lives.
At home. Yeah. Well, yeah. can understand that.
I'm not telling them to not love their family, or that obviously family, I mean, your relationship with your parents is what you've had since you opened your eyes, or with a lover, or whatever. Um, but I think, but I think the fear around change over there is so high that I find that the biggest challenge. Everyone can meet my little daughter. Say adab to everyone.
Ada, baby, lovely to meet you. Yeah. Right. More questions, anyone? There's Anurag, Swati, Nicha, Nadia. Anybody? Okay. So it looks like that's that. So thank you again, Madhavi. This has been so wonderful, so inspiring. I was going to ask you who your role models are, but we covered all of that, and you are now going to be one of our role models. So thank you so much for sharing. We
and
don't know
if you all want to understand, I could talk for 16 hours. So I'm sorry if I didn't tell enough stories, but
it was absolutely awe-inspiring. Really, and please keep at it, and you have all the love and support from us. And thank you so
thank
much.
you for making me part of your family and your gang, or whatever, which is a better word. You'll have to decide.
Yeah. So look forward to lots of future interactions, and thank you again. So good night.
Thank you.